For centuries, humanity has been held under the spell of a reductive, mechanistic worldview. Matter as the fundamental substance, the mind merely a byproduct of the brain, and reality a collection of objects in motion. Federico Faggin, physicist, engineer, and pioneer of modern computing, began his career firmly committed to that paradigm. He was the architect of the first commercial microprocessor, a central figure in the digital revolution. Yet, what appeared to be a purely technical journey gradually transformed into an odyssey toward the very core of being. Faggin poses a radical question. What if reality is not a machine, but a living organism? What if consciousness does not emerge from matter, but is the very foundation from which everything arises? This shift in perspective is not merely philosophical. It is a scientific, existential, and ontological proposal that led him to develop a completely new vision of the universe. For Faggin, consciousness cannot be explained through classical physics. It is not reducible to neurons firing electrical impulses, nor can it be simulated by algorithms. It is not an epiphenomenon. Rather, it is the ground upon which all else occurs. This conviction did not emerge only from intellectual analysis, but from a deep, transformative, direct experience. During a moment of meditation, Faggin perceived the dissolution of time, space, and the individual self. In its place arose a living, loving, infinite presence. It was not an idea. It was a lived experience. That experience compelled him to re-examine his understanding of reality. It inspired him to investigate the limits of modern science, from quantum physics to biology and the philosophy of mind. This was not merely a passing sensation. It shook the very foundation of how he perceived existence. The encounter revealed dimensions of being that could not be explained through any equation or experiment. It introduced an inner certainty that what we call reality is only a fragment of a deeper, more connected order, one that science has yet to fully grasp. In doing so, he discovered that science as practiced systematically excludes the subjective. Yet all knowledge, however objective it may seem, must be experienced by a conscious subject. If consciousness is the sole portal to the world, how can it be considered secondary? This question led Faggin to formulate a new ontology, an architecture of reality integrating three fundamental dimensions: consciousness, information, and the physical. The model, which he named CIP, begins with the premise that consciousness comes first. From it emerges information, understood not as cold data, but as lived meaning. And finally, the physical world. This framework explains why machines can process symbols, but cannot grasp meaning, why they can execute orders, but cannot hold intentions, and why the universe, far from being an empty backdrop, is a living choreography of shared meanings among conscious entities. Faggin defines these entities as CITES, indivisible units of consciousness endowed with identity, free will, and the capacity to know. Every conscious being, from a human to a microscopic organism, could be considered a CITE. These entities do not exist in physical space, but in a semantic space, where time is non-linear and relationships are based not on mechanical causality, but on resonances of meaning. Within this semantic space, experience is not transmitted as technical information, but as living understanding. It is not a matter of bits, but a transformation of being. A CITE does not know like a computer. It is what it has understood. And here lies the radical limitation of the materialist paradigm. It cannot account for how the objective becomes the lived. From this standpoint, the universe is not a mere assembly of atoms in random motion. It is a living totality, a process in which each act of consciousness alters the field of possibility. Reality is not external to us. It happens with and through us. We are not passive observers. We are active participants in the creation of the world. This shift does not demolish science. It enriches it. It invites us to construct a fuller form of science in which the subjective is not marginalized, but integrated. A science that recognizes that the deepest knowledge is not the accumulation of data, but the transformation of being. Such a transformation demands new metaphors, new experimental paradigms, and new methods. It calls for attention training, meditative insight, and collaborative inquiry. It encourages the integration of first-person perspectives with third-person rigor. In this living science, measurement coexists with metamorphosis and emotion with precision. And if this is true, then reality is not an object to be dissected. It is a living mystery that beckons us to awaken. Federico Faggin, one of the founding fathers of the digital revolution, developed the first microprocessor at Intel. He was both a witness to and a key figure in the birth of intelligent machines. But over time, his perspective on technology changed dramatically. Despite the astonishing progress of artificial intelligence, Faggin insists there is an uncrossable boundary. Machines will never be conscious. Computers process symbols, but not meaning. This, he explains, is not merely a technical distinction, it is an ontological one. Human knowledge has a semantic dimension. It is lived from within. To understand an emotion, to have an intention, or to experience beauty are not just cognitive acts. They involve subjectivity, something machines neither possess nor can replicate. To make this point clear, Faggin turns to the concept of symbols. Machines work with arbitrary representations, bits, commands, data patterns. But humans don't merely interpret symbols, we live them. Feeling pain, loving someone, doubting a decision, or having a sudden intuition are not operations reducible to lines of code. These are experiences, and experience requires consciousness. True experience is not simply the result of data processing. It arises through awareness, through an inner sense of presence. A machine, no matter how advanced, lacks this inward dimension. It cannot know what it is like to be itself. This absence of interiority means that no AI, no matter how human-like it may appear, can ever cross the threshold into true consciousness. Simulating intelligence is not the same as experiencing the world from the inside. Many people believe that if a machine were to reach sufficient complexity, consciousness would spontaneously emerge. Faggin refutes this. There is no evidence that faster processors, larger memory, or more advanced algorithms lead to inner awareness. Complexity does not produce subjectivity. One can simulate a hurricane on a computer, but no one gets wet. In the same way, an AI can mimic emotion, but it cannot feel. This limitation becomes especially serious when we confuse intelligence with consciousness. Machines can learn patterns, optimize processes, and even outperform humans in certain logical tasks. But they do not know that they know. They lack a self. They have no true intentions nor deep understanding. Their reasoning is statistical, not meaningful. They have no interior freedom. They do not choose from within. Faggin distinguishes between two types of knowledge: symbolic knowledge, which is objective, shareable, and externally manipulable, and semantic knowledge, which is subjective, lived, and transformative. Machines are confined to the first. Only conscious beings have access to the second. This type of knowing cannot be installed from the outside. It arises from the core of being. Furthermore, machines are closed systems defined by fixed or probabilistic rules. They have no free will. They cannot make moral decisions. They act within predefined frameworks without any understanding of the meaning behind their actions. An AI can decide which advert to show a person, but it cannot comprehend what it means to manipulate someone. There is no ethics without consciousness. This poses a profound dilemma in an age where increasing responsibility is being handed over to automated systems. Faggin warns that in believing machines can replace humans, we are devaluing the most essential part of ourselves, our capacity to feel, to choose, to intuit, and to create from lived experience. The transhumanist dream of transferring consciousness into a chip is, to him, a seductive illusion built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are. We are not sophisticated machines. We are conscious beings, and that cannot be replicated. Faggin stresses that the real danger is not that machines might come to life, but that we might forget what it means to be alive. As technology continues to advance, our mission is not to compete with machines, but to rediscover our humanity. The goal is not to make robots more human, but to make humans more conscious of themselves. For decades, materialism has dominated science with a central claim. Every phenomenon can be explained in terms of matter and its interactions. In this view, the universe is a mechanical structure, governed by fixed laws, where even our decisions are the inevitable result of physical and chemical processes in the brain. Free will, they say, is nothing more than an illusion. But what if all of that is profoundly mistaken? Federico Faggin, who witnessed the rise of advanced technology from within, came to realize that this paradigm is not only limited, it is fundamentally flawed. His direct experience of consciousness led him to question the very foundations of the science that had shaped him. And through that questioning, he discovered something essential. Free will is not an illusion. It is the root of what we are. Under materialism, everything is determined. If the brain is a machine, then its future states are set by its past ones. There is no room for genuine choice. But if that were true, knowledge itself would collapse. As Faggin explains, if we cannot freely choose to believe or reject a theory, then the very act of knowing becomes invalid. Objectivity only makes sense if there is a free subject capable of deciding what to accept as true. Without this freedom, science becomes nothing more than a programmed sequence of observations, devoid of true interpretation. It would mean that every scientific breakthrough, every ethical reflection, and every philosophical insight were mere byproducts of neural mechanics, void of intentional thought. Such a view strips meaning from inquiry and turns human understanding into an illusion of autonomy. Faggin challenges us to reconsider. What if our freedom to think, to doubt, and to choose is not a glitch in the system, but the very system from which meaning emerges? This has deep implications. Without free will, there is no moral responsibility, no genuine creativity, no possibility for conscious evolution. But Faggin goes further. He proposes that free will is not an emergent phenomenon. It is fundamental to consciousness itself. To be conscious is to be able to choose. The problem, he points out, is that traditional science excludes the subjective. It treats consciousness as an epiphenomenon, something that happens in the brain but has no real effect. But that is a logical error. We cannot study consciousness from the outside, because consciousness is where everything begins. Every experience, every measurement, every theory starts with a subject who experiences. This leads him to a direct critique of determinism. If we accept that everything is determined, including our thoughts and emotions, then the very meaning of life dissolves. There is no merit, no blame, no purpose, only inevitable chemical reactions. But that is not what we live. We all feel that we choose, and that lived sense, far from being an illusion, is direct access to a deeper dimension of reality. Faggin therefore proposes an expanded science, one that recognizes consciousness as an active part of the universe, a science that does not deny lived experience but integrates it. In this framework, free will does not contradict causality, it complements it. Not everything is predetermined. There is space for novelty, for the unexpected, for inner transformation. This new paradigm not only restores the value of human experience, it also offers a way out of the dead end of reductionism. If consciousness is real and free, then reality is not a machine. It is a creative process in which every conscious being participates. To deny free will is to deny the human being. To reclaim it is to begin to understand who we truly are. The history of humanity is deeply interwoven with its technologies. From the wheel to the satellite, every tool has extended our capabilities, but it has also reshaped our understanding of what it means to be human. For Federico Faggin, one of the architects of the digital era, understanding how machines have changed the world is also about understanding how they have changed our perception of ourselves. It all began with the steam engine. The Industrial Revolution replaced muscular strength with mechanical energy. It shifted the world from farms to factories, from workshops to assembly lines, and from craftsmen to laborers. It was a colossal leap, but that was only the first act. The second, quieter yet more transformative, came with electricity, the telegraph, and ultimately, computing. The 20th century gave birth to a new kind of machine, the symbolic machine. Unlike those that transformed energy, these transformed information. First came relays, then vacuum tubes, followed by transistors. And finally, in 1971, the microprocessor. Faggin, as head of the team at Intel, condensed into a single chip what had previously required entire cabinets of circuitry. Thus was born the personal computer, the beating heart of the digital world. But this was not merely a technical breakthrough. It reconfigured culture itself. The computer became a symbol of precision, efficiency, and control. Its binary logic, its language of zeros and ones, began to influence our institutions, how we teach, diagnose, manage businesses, and even how we understand love. Everything became data. Everything could be measured, processed, optimized. But as the digital paradigm expanded, it also began to reshape our inner expectations. People started to measure their worth in metrics, to translate emotions into data points, to outsource memory and even decision-making. The very tools designed to serve us began, quietly and subtly, to redefine the contours of our human experience. Faggin witnessed this transformation firsthand, and while he celebrates the achievements of computing, he also warns of a dangerous confusion, believing that human beings are machines. Computers process symbols, but they do not understand. They execute commands, but they do not choose. They have no emotions, no intuition, no sense of purpose. An AI might compose a poem, but it cannot be moved by it. This reductionist view has led to a loss of depth. Education is seen as uploading information. Healing becomes reprogramming the body. Love is reduced to an exchange of stimuli, but the human being is not a closed system. We are consciousness, open to meaning, to mystery, to freedom. Faggin offers a richer vision, to use technology as an extension of our humanity, not as its model. To recognize that no matter how sophisticated a machine becomes, it cannot replace experience. Behind every innovation is the spark of a conscious being, capable of imagination, of dreaming, of transcendence. The shift from steam to silicon transformed the outer world. Now, the question is whether it can help us rediscover the inner one. Because the true revolution will not be digital, it will be conscious. In the 20th century, humanity took a monumental leap in its way of thinking, thanks to a young British mathematician, Alan Turing. In 1936, Turing conceived of a theoretical machine capable of performing any mathematical operation that could be expressed as an algorithm. This concept, known as the Turing machine, not only laid the foundation for modern computing, but it also redefined the nature of thought itself. Turing didn't invent a physical machine, but rather an idea, a logical structure that could read symbols on an infinite tape, move, write, erase, and make decisions according to predefined rules. The revolutionary part was his demonstration that such a machine could simulate any other computable process. It was, in essence, a universal machine. Decades later, Federico Faggin and his team at Intel brought that idea from paper to silicon. With the microprocessor, they achieved the unthinkable. They made the universal machine physical. A single chip could now execute any program, emulate any system, from a calculator to a spacecraft. Computing was democratized, but so too was a deep misunderstanding intensified. The confusion between the ability to compute and the capacity to understand. This misunderstanding gave rise to a new mythology, one that portrays intelligence as the mastery of information and consciousness as a side effect of complex processing. It suggests that if a machine can mimic human output, it must share human insight. But imitation is not identity. The illusion of similarity masks the absence of interiority, of awareness, of the spark of being. Turing himself was ambiguous about whether machines could truly think. In his famous 1950 essay, he proposed the Turing test. If a machine could hold a conversation indistinguishable from that of a human, it should be considered intelligent. Yet, as philosopher John Searle later argued, simulating understanding is not the same as understanding. His famous thought experiment, the Chinese room, illustrates this well. A system can manipulate symbols without having any idea what they mean. Faggin revisits this debate with remarkable clarity. For him, the power of the universal machine is technical, not existential. It can replicate functions, but not feelings. It can imitate decisions, but it cannot hold intentions. The symbolic realm is only one aspect of reality. What's missing is the semantic, the lived, the inner dimension. In this sense, the Turing machine both reveals and conceals. It demonstrates the reach of logical reasoning, but also its limitations. Not everything can be codified. Not everything can be reduced to rules. Meaning, love, beauty, consciousness itself eludes formal language. And that is not a defect, but an essential quality of the human. Faggin acknowledges Turing's genius, but he invites us to go further, to remember that although machines may be universal in function, they cannot encompass the fullness of existence. Consciousness, in all its mystery, remains the space in which reality truly gains meaning. In an era where machines can learn, speak, paint, and even write poetry, a question haunts philosophers, scientists, and everyday people alike. How similar can robots truly become to humans? Federico Faggin, inventor of the first microprocessor and deep thinker on the nature of consciousness, answers without hesitation. Robots are not, and will never be, like us. The difference does not lie in form or function. It's not simply that we are made of carbon and they of silicon. The true distinction is ontological. We are conscious beings. Robots are not. No matter how advanced, a robot is a symbolic system. It processes external information, reacts to stimuli, and adapts its behavior based on algorithms. It can imitate human voice, body language, even artistic style. But it lacks interiority. It has no lived experience. There is no I behind its actions. It acts, but it does not live. Faggin makes this distinction through two types of knowledge: symbolic and semantic. Symbolic knowledge, typical of machines, relies on representations, rules, and data manipulation. It is external, mechanical, and predictable. Semantic knowledge, by contrast, is lived. It transforms us from within. When we understand something, when we love, suffer, or make a conscious choice, it cannot be simulated because it is not merely information, it is experience. This difference becomes even clearer when we observe the workings of a living organism. A human being does not merely react, we interpret. We don't just learn, we assign meaning to what we learn. We don't simply execute, we choose. Our body, mind, and personal history are woven into an indivisible unity, one that cannot be dissected without destroying what makes us who we are. A robot, on the other hand, has no lived history. It can store data, but not emotional memory. It can perform actions, but it cannot feel pride or regret. It can simulate empathy, but never possess real compassion. Even when it appears autonomous, everything it does is predetermined, either by its programming or by the data on which it was trained. There is no genuine freedom because there is no being. This absence is not just technical, it's metaphysical. The lack of a self means robots cannot reflect, cannot grieve, cannot aspire. They are incapable of wonder. And yet, our society increasingly entrusts these soulless systems with tasks once reserved for humans. We must ask, are we enhancing our world or surrendering what makes it human in the first place? Faggin stresses that this difference, though clear, is often ignored by the mechanistic worldview that reduces human beings to biological machines. In the name of efficiency, we risk dehumanizing ourselves, becoming interchangeable parts within a vast technical system. But that vision is false and dangerous. This is not a call to reject robots, but to resist becoming like them. We must use technology wisely, never losing sight of what makes us unique, our ability to feel, to choose, to create from the depths of consciousness. Faggin insists that living organisms are not sophisticated computers. They are open, dynamic systems in constant transformation. They possess an inner direction, an intention that cannot be reduced to functions. Life is not a program. It is an evolving experience. The real battle is not external. It is not between us and machines. It is internal. The daily struggle to preserve our humanity in an increasingly automated world. It is the conscious decision to resist automatism, to defend the mystery of what it means to be alive. Modern science often explains the origin of life as a gradual and mechanical process. Molecules, through chance and favorable conditions, assembled into increasingly complex structures until life emerged. Yet this explanation leaves one crucial question unanswered. How did consciousness arise? How did inert matter come to know it exists? Federico Faggin, with his unique dual perspective as both scientist and philosopher, proposes a radical inversion. It wasn't matter that produced consciousness. It was consciousness that gave rise to matter. Far from being a spiritual belief, this idea is a rigorous ontological hypothesis with profound scientific implications. For Faggin, consciousness is not a product of biological evolution. It is the foundation of reality itself. Before space, before time, before energy, there was already a form of primordial consciousness. From this foundational awareness emerged all forms, including life as we know it. This perspective transforms the classic question, how did consciousness emerge in the universe? Into an even more compelling one. How did the universe emerge in consciousness? This reversal of perspective is not entirely new. Philosophical traditions in both East and West have long suggested that consciousness is primary. But Faggin makes the case with the precision of someone who spent decades designing the circuitry that powers the most advanced machines. His experience tells him no system can develop interiority from the outside. No algorithm, no matter how perfect, can give rise to subjective experience. From this foundation, Faggin proposes an alternative model of evolution, an evolution of consciousness. Rather than seeing the universe as beginning with dead matter that slowly became complex enough to awaken, he suggests it began as a living field of expanding awareness. Within this field arose seities, individual units of consciousness capable of perception, decision, and transformation. These seities are not made of atoms but of experience, and unlike physical particles, which obey mechanical causality, seities act through meaning and intention. Their growth is not measured in complexity of form, but in depth of understanding. They evolve by engaging with the world, by reflecting on their actions, by transforming themselves through insight. This inner journey is not visible to instruments, but it shapes the very structure of what we call reality. They exist in a semantic space where meaning precedes symbol and where intention gives rise to reality. Every living organism, from a single cell to a human being, is an expression of an embodied seiety. Life, then, is not an anomaly within physical reality. It is its essential manifestation. This model addresses one of modern science's greatest unsolved problems, the mind-body dilemma. Whereas the materialist view cannot explain how a brain creates subjective experience, Faggin's approach begins with experience as the primary data. There is no need for an inexplicable leap. Subjectivity does not emerge at the end of the process. It is there from the beginning. This view also redefines biological evolution, not merely as adaptation, but as the unfolding of inner learning. Consciousness does not merely observe the universe, it participates actively in its creation. Each experience lived by a sati reshapes the field of possibilities. Evolution is no longer a blind race for survival, but a creative dance of emerging meanings. Faggin does not reject biology, chemistry, or physics. He calls for complementing them with a science of consciousness, a discipline that does not ignore lived experience, intention, or symbolic depth. A science that moves beyond mere quantification and embraces qualitative understanding. Because, as he states, reality is not a collection of facts, it is a process of comprehension, a process that unfolds differently for each conscious being. Some learn through suffering, others through wonder, but in every case, understanding deepens not just knowledge, but identity. Consciousness is not a passive mirror of the world. It is an active sculptor, shaping experience, revealing patterns, and discovering meaning. In this sense, to evolve is not simply to survive, but to remember more profoundly what it means to be. If this view holds true, then the origin of life is not merely found in a primordial soup of molecules. It lies in an original act of perception. Life did not begin when a molecule first replicated. It began when a conscious entity chose to know. Since that moment, everything that exists has become part of an ever-expanding field of understanding. This idea carries not only scientific consequences, but existential ones. If we are saties in evolution, then every experience has value. Every emotion, every thought, every relationship becomes part of a vast process of universal self-knowledge. We are not here by accident. We are here to learn, to feel, to understand. Thus, the enigma of life's origin becomes an invitation to awaken, to recognize ourselves not as biological machines, but as conscious beings taking part in a living creation. And perhaps, in that awakening, we will find that what we have always searched for outside, meaning, origin, truth, has always been within. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.